All right, so in the middle of the massive war of the Triple Alliance, there was this one fortress, right? It was considered absolutely unbreakable, the key to defending an entire nation. But a new weapon was on its way, a kind of steel monster built for one reason: to smash it. So today, we're going to see exactly what happens when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force.
Yeah, this is really the heart of it, isn't it? It's this incredible, dramatic clash between Paraguay's strongest defense and Brazil's totally game-changing naval technology. Okay, so to really get what's going on, we have to start with the fortress itself, the Paraguayan stronghold of Humaitá. It was formidable.
I want you to picture Humaita like this giant dam. It was this whole complex of powerful cannon batteries lining the river, and it completely blocked any ships from sailing up to the capital, Asunción. For 2 solid years of the war, it was just this massive, frustrating, and what seemed like an unbreakable wall for the Allies.
Well, you know what they say. If you build a wall, someone's going to figure out how to knock it down. And that brings us to Brazil's new weapon, a piece of technology designed for a single, brutal purpose: to smash right through Humaita. So what did the Brazilians bring to the party? Something totally new: the Monitor. For centuries, navies were all about these big wooden ships. But these were different. They were low to the water, basically floating tanks, covered in heavy armor. They were built specifically for fighting on rivers and could take an incredible amount of punishment. Okay, so just look at these specs. This is what made these things so terrifying. First off, with only a foot of the ship showing above the water, it was an insanely small target to hit. Then, that tiny target was wrapped in 4 inches of iron on the hull and a massive 6 inches on the turret. And the crew? They could aim and fire their powerful cannon from inside, completely protected. It was a total game changer.
And all of this leads to the night the theory gets put to the test, and this unstoppable weapon is finally let loose against the so-called unbreakable fortress. So picture this. It's the middle of the night on February 18th, 1868. At 3:30 in the morning, the entire Allied fleet just erupts, opening up this furious bombardment to distract the Paraguayan gunners. Under the cover of all that chaos, 3 big ironclads charge ahead, full steam past the fortress. And get this, each one is towing a smaller, tougher Monitor right alongside it for extra power and protection. By the time the sun came up, they had done what everyone thought was impossible. They were past Humaita. And the fighting was just unbelievably fierce. I mean, the Paraguayan gunners were not sleeping on the job, their aim was good, and their fire was heavy. The Monitor Alagoas took, get this, 180 direct hits. The bigger ironclad, the Tamandaré, got hit 120 times. But in the end, it didn't really matter. The same Paraguayan cannonballs that had controlled that river for years just broke apart. They literally shattered when they hit the thick iron plating of these new ships. The dam was breached, and the psychological blow, not to mention the strategic one, was just immense. So with that dam finally broken, the river was suddenly wide open. And that meant the path to the capital, Asunción, was clear. The results for the people there, well, they were immediate and just catastrophic. I mean, the news hit the capital like a shockwave. Paraguay's president, Francisco Solano López, made a really drastic call. He declared Asunción a military zone and ordered every single person to evacuate within 24 hours. Can you even imagine the panic? People just grabbed what they could carry and fled. The government moved to a nearby town, but it was chaos. So many families had nowhere to go, they were just living outdoors, and food shortages hit hard and fast. And just 4 days later, 4 days, the Brazilian ironclads show up at the capital. They lob about 60 bombs into what was basically a ghost town. This wasn't about conquering the city anymore, it was about sending a message, a powerful, symbolic strike to prove that the heart of Paraguay was now completely defenseless. But here's the thing. This was not the end of the war, not even close. If anything, it forced President López to completely change the game. He had to ditch conventional warfare and start embracing desperate, sometimes brilliant, and often brutal new tactics. And you can see this in 2 incredible but very different examples of resistance. On the one hand, you have this incredibly audacious, almost suicidal raid. Men in 24 canoes paddled out in the dark to try and board and capture 2 ironclads. They actually made it onto the decks, but they were just mowed down by machine gun fire coming from inside the sealed turrets.
Then on the other hand, you had this stunning feat of defense. At a position called the Redoubt Sierva, a small Paraguayan force fought off 4 separate attacks by 8,000 Brazilians. They inflicted 1,200 casualties before they were forced to retreat, and only because they literally ran out of ammo.
See, Lopez wasn't stupid. He knew his old defensive trench lines were now flanked and totally useless. So he pulls off this brilliant strategic retreat. He uses the few steamships he has left to move his best soldiers and his cannons through the Chaco, which is this incredibly difficult terrain. He just abandons his old positions, leaving Humaitá completely cut off. He was saving his army to fight another day, and in doing so, he was changing the entire war.
Okay, so you think this was a total win for the Allies, right? Well, not so fast, because while they won the battle, they created a logistical nightmare for themselves. Their most powerful, most advanced warships were now trapped deep in enemy territory and completely cut off from their main supply lines. And you want to talk about expensive? Getting supplies to these ships became astronomically costly. Just look at this number. 10 pounds sterling to move one single 150-pound cannonball overland to the fleet. You have to understand, that was a huge amount of money back then, like months of pay for a skilled worker. For a single shot, it's an incredible cost.
And if you think that's bad, look at the cost of fuel, the lifeblood of these ships. 32 pounds sterling per ton for coal. What these numbers really show us is that even though the Ironclads had broken through the physical dam of Humaitá, the cost of keeping them there was creating its own kind of dam, a massive logistical and financial one that was just bleeding the Allied war effort dry.
So when you boil it all down, this story is way more than just one battle. It's a really powerful example of how one big technological jump can make years of careful strategy totally obsolete, just overnight. But it also makes you ask a bigger question, one that's still relevant today. When you're faced with an unstoppable new weapon, what do you even do? Does war just become this desperate game of retreat, of unconventional fighting, and a brutal battle of logistics? It's a question they had to answer then, and honestly, it's a question military planners are still wrestling with today.